Okay, moving on with the notes for Chapter 1. This is going to cover Sections 3 and 4 of your notes. So we'll get things underway with talking about the lore of lore. Quote from your textbook, give the people what they want, find out what works and what doesn't work. That's a simple process, right? Well, it can be a whole lot more complicated than that, especially when it comes to media programming. So this is one of those cases where the idea of universal truth or absolute truth may not necessarily help us here, because audiences and tastes and culture continually evolve, and it seems like in our later years that it seems to happen much more rapidly and much more profoundly than it has in past years. Things like dead genres come to mind, where things that used to work in terms of TV programming several years ago wouldn't necessarily work today. I remember as a kid growing up that local TV stations would air their own game shows of sorts, such as Bowling for Dollars, or a couple of TV stations in the Pittsburgh area had a bingo game that they would do. You would pick up bingo cards from a local grocery store and play bingo on TV. You don't really see a whole lot of that anymore. Formulas lead to bland television. So you have kind of a template of an idea, and you substitute the name of a city, the name of a family, the type of family they are, but it tends to be kind of the same sort of program as other shows. Those things don't tend to work as much anymore. And certain formats always fail. Well, we're seeing that kind of thinking from several years ago. People are trying those formats now, and we're starting to see that they're actually doing pretty well. Some of the reality TV shows, or what we call reality television. So you've got more game show based ones like Survivor and Amazing Race and things like that. But if you watch a lot of cable television, MTV really did a lot with reality television. The Real World and Jersey Shore and shows like that. They made it. So it's hard to be able to say what you would suggest would be popular, not popular, successful, not successful. And that answer may change 5 years from now from what you would answer today. Structural considerations. Programming can be seen as largely a matter of choosing materials and building a schedule, of course followed by promotion and evaluation. So there is that logistical aspect that you take what you have available to you, the content that you have, and you try to put it in such a way that it lines up, that this airs at this time, this airs at that time, and you're being strategic in how you plan all of that together. Sources of programming. Well, some sources include network programs. Network programs, instantaneous national distribution, and simultaneous programming. So a CBS station in Raleigh is going to air the same content at the same time that the CBS station in New York or Miami or Atlanta does. Network produced news and information shows and purchase of Hollywood productions also coming from networks. So you've got the branding of the particular network with CBS Evening News or World News Tonight on ABC. Also a lot of the productions that the power of the networks have with their large purse are able to make available to their affiliates. Many public broadcasters, I should say, produce and share programming with other public broadcasters. So you've got local public TV stations like WGBH in Boston, WTTW in Chicago, a couple of the major players there, but just about every local PBS station produces some sort of content, and it's not unusual for at least one or two shows that television station produces to be made available to a wider audience. Hispanic channels programming largely coming from Mexico, Central America, South America for distribution here in the United States. Cable becoming more of a home for off-network programming hits and self-produced content. Many cable network programmers have less creative input on programming decisions than their broadcast counterparts do. Part of that is because cable networks tend to program its content to a particular format or a particular niche audience. So you usually don't have as much wide variety of programming on cable as you do on broadcast TV from channel to channel. And there's also the fact that because of the way that companies produce their content, they're going to have a vested interest in producing in rather airing stuff that they have produced themselves, because it's going to be more cost effective that way to be able to do that. Splinter channels are virtual channels that provide tight niche programming. So in the case of cable, you've got the Discovery Channel, which also has Investigation Discovery and Discovery Health. The Starz Network has several different incarnations of its movie channel, fitting several different types of movies. You got the drama channel and the comedy channel and the family channel, all within with that Starz branding. And many cable networks splinter themselves in that way. The internet, more varied programming sources, TV, radio, original content, amateur content. It all can have relatively short or relatively long series lengths. You're not tied into 30 minutes or 60 minutes. You can have something that airs less than a minute long, and you can have things that run for several hours. All depends on what it is that the programmer wants to do. In the world of radio, you've got all sorts of different things that are being offered by networks: news, features, program inserts, full formats. So we tend to think of it in radio a lot in terms of news programming. If you're getting the CBS radio news, for example, or content that up until recently, a lot of news was put out by a company called Westwood One. They just ceased their radio operations in August of 2020. But you've also got different types of programming that's available from talk shows. Premier Network's a huge distributor of conservative talk in particular, but music content as well, like American Top 40. All of that is networked. Syndicated programs, and you've got several different types of syndicated programs that are available. Off-network series are programs that have reverted to their copyright owners after the network that first aired them has used up the contractual number of plays. So that's a very wordy way of saying that, when NCIS, for example, ran its original episodes on CBS. So the first couple of seasons that it's run is now made available to local TV outlets, to cable outlets, to run those earlier seasons because the network has already aired what they're going to air. First run syndicated series, programs packaged independently by producers and marketed directly to individual stations. This is going to be a good example of this would be a lot of like the news magazine type shows like Inside Edition, Entertainment Tonight. Also a lot of shows that you may see that aren't necessarily picked up by the networks for one reason or another. Different comedy shows and game shows. Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy would be huge examples of that. Feature films, movies made originally for theatrical exhibition that are picked up by local television stations or cable outlets to run on agreement with the production company that produced them. And then there's local production, shows produced in-house. These days, that's largely going to be your newscasts, your public affairs programming. I talked a little bit earlier on about some of the shows that ran on TV when I was a kid. Anything that would be produced by a local television station would be in this particular category. So let's talk now about the uniqueness of scheduling and some of the challenges that may come up for programmers as they're trying to put its schedule of shows together. The audience for one show normally influences adjacent programs. So in other words, if you sit and watch a particular network on a particular night in prime time, you're going to notice that many times the programming that is made available on that particular night is usually going to be similar in content, or it's going to have similarities in terms of the types of appeal that it has to a particular type of audience. A good example of this is Saturday nights on CBS. They do what they call Crime Time Saturday. So they feature a lot of their shows that focus on solving crimes and that sort of thing. And you're going to find other networks on other particular nights. They're going to put certain types of shows together so that the audience from show A is going to be more likely to stick with that particular channel and continue watching into show B. Effective scheduling requires an understanding of one's own and one's competitors' coverage patterns, market, and audience demographics. So you know your audience and you know your programming, but you also are going to be in a much more strategic position if you understand that of your competitor as well. You also understand where you reach geographically, what sort of people live within that geographic coverage pattern. You understand the area that you live in, the culture of the area you live in. That's part of understanding your market. In other words, people that live in the Raleigh area are generally going to have certain interests that aren't necessarily going to be shared by people in Philadelphia or in Boston. Cable operators prefer to give the choicest positions, the lowest in a group, because they are the easiest to remember, to the most popular or the most lucrative services, whether they are broadcast or they are cable only. The need for promotion. The broadcast and cable networks forego billions of dollars in advertising revenue in order to promote their programs on their own air. So if you're watching television on any given night, it's interesting. Take a look and see how many times they promote their own content within commercial breaks, as opposed to using that time for commercial inventory. And it's a significant amount of time. They do that intentionally so that they can showcase what other sorts of content they have available in hopes that you, the audience member, will see that promo, be attracted to it, and think, ooh, I need to tune in to watch that. Millions are spent on paid programming advertising on other media as well. And we've talked about this in terms of billboards, in terms of print advertising. You'll hear television promos on radio stations that they purchase the airtime to air. And we're also seeing more and more that stations and networks are willing to promote their network on another network. Usually it's going to be a co-owned network, but it's not completely out of the question to, say, run a promo for a broadcast television outlet on a competing cable outlet. Having a presence in the online world has become a necessity for all of the broadcast networks. How programs are promoted are as important as how they are scheduled, because the best program without promotion doesn't have an audience because nobody knows that it's there. And really what that means is that programmers understand that its audience is rather fickle, that they've got a lot of things coming at them, screaming for their attention. So promotion, 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 getting the word out there, talking things up so that people consistently and continually hear about the different offerings that a media outlet has, and in hopes that one of those messages will stick with you and that you'll have the desire to tune in. And just how important is this promotion? Well, just a ratings point or two stands between the number 1 and the number 3 broadcast networks in most years. And that can mean the difference in millions of dollars of revenue. Most cable networks differ by only a fraction of a ratings point. And in cable, where we're talking about numbers that, by and large, as individual networks, still don't compare to the ratings that come in by broadcast networks, it is a huge deal for a cable network to beat another cable network by even a tenth of a ratings point. The competition is that fierce. Promotion of online programs largely consists of gaining favored placement in Google lists. Virtually all top placement is purchased on Google. Branding, that's the creation of an overall image. Fostering positive images has value in building of audiences. So you think about the importance of the value of a brand. It's basically the identity of that which you are promoting. Everybody knows what the Golden Arches stands for. Everybody knows what the swish is on the side of a tennis shoe. If you are able to easily identify a brand and associate it with a particular company, in this case associate it with a particular media outlet, it's going to be a much more positive outcome for your network, for your broadcast outlet, if people know who you are, can say you by name, can say you by your brand, and ultimately recognize that brand and tune into you as a result. So that's part B. We continue on with part C, starting with section 5 of your notes in the next video.